In April of 1956, Nat King Cole was performing at the Municipal Auditorium in Birmingham, Alabama, before a segregated white audience, when a group of men rushed the stage during his performance and attacked him. Cole was not from his piano bench. He was taken backstage, where he was treated briefly, and then he returned to the stage and finished the concert. The attack was covered by newspapers across the country. The reaction from the entertainment industry, from the studios, the networks, the record labels, the management agencies that controlled access to the largest stages in American show business, was largely silence. Cole continued working. The men who attacked him were arrested and later acquitted. The Nat King Cole Show, the television program Cole was hosting on NBC at the time, continued without sponsors for its entire run, and was eventually canceled because no major advertiser would buy time on a program hosted by a black man. Nat King Cole was, by 1956, one of the most successful entertainers in America by every measure that could be applied to the industry. His records sold in numbers that most performers could not approach. His voice, warm, precise, conversational in the way that Bing Crosby had been conversational, intimate in the way that the microphone made possible for a certain kind of performer, had become one of the most recognized sounds on American radio. He had built this career with a discipline and a grace that those who knew him described consistently. Cole did not make his professional life about the conditions under which he worked. He made it about the work. He navigated the arrangements of an industry and a country that had very clear ideas about the acceptable parameters of a black man's success with a composure that those who observed it sometimes found difficult to understand, because it looked from the outside like acceptance of what was not acceptable. Louis Armstrong was watching. Not simply watching the Cole situation. Armstrong was not, by temperament or by professional strategy, someone who kept close track of industry politics. But the quality of what was happening in 1956 was visible enough that it required no particular attention to observe. The America that celebrated black performers, and the America that arranged their professional lives, were, in this period, as in all the preceding ones, the same America. A fact that neither Cole nor Armstrong had ever been in a position to forget, and that the Birmingham attack had made newly, undeniably visible to anyone who had still been managing not to see it clearly. The broadcast went to air on time. Armstrong was introduced to the audience in the way that television introductions of the era were made, warmly, briefly, with the particular professional warmth of a host who has been instructed to make a guest feel welcome on camera. The audience visible in the studio responded to Armstrong's name the way studio audiences responded to names they recognized, with applause, with the slightly heightened attention of people who are seeing in person someone they know from records and radio. What Armstrong did when he walked out in front of the cameras was what he always did when he walked out in front of cameras or an audience. He smiled, broadly and immediately, the smile arriving with him rather than appearing once he'd settled into position. The smile of someone who is genuinely glad to be in the room with the people he's looking at. He performed with the full attention and full warmth that he brought to every performance, the quality of presence that made audiences feel not observed from a distance, but included. The segment went well. The music was the music. The audience responded the way audiences responded to Armstrong performing live, with a quality of attention and a warmth of response that was difficult to manufacture and that Armstrong produced consistently, regardless of context. What the 30 million people watching at home saw was a performance. What they didn't see, what they had no way of seeing, from their positions in living rooms across the country, was what had happened in the corridor before the broadcast began. The weight that Armstrong had carried into the studio building that evening, the conversation in the corridor, the knowledge of what had happened in Birmingham and what the industry's response had been, and what it meant to be the next black performer to walk onto a major network stage. The 30 million people saw a man smiling and playing and performing with complete warmth and full command. They received what Armstrong had decided they would receive, the music, whole and undiminished, without the context that surrounded it. Nat King Cole, watching from somewhere in the building, saw something different. He saw a man do what he had done in Birmingham, walk out onto a stage in an America that had made its position on the matter fairly clear, and perform anyway, completely. The similarity was not accidental, and Cole understood it as such. What Armstrong was doing was not a response to Birmingham. It was something he had been doing for 30 years on stages across the country and the world. But the context of 1956 gave it a visibility that it had always had, but that was now impossible for anyone paying attention to not see. To understand what Louis Armstrong's television appearance meant in the context of 1956, it helps to understand what national television meant in that moment. The major networks reached, on their most popular programs, audiences of 30 to 40 million people simultaneously, a scale of visibility that no other medium could approach, and that carried with it a particular kind of cultural weight. What appeared on those programs, and who appeared on them, was understood by everyone involved, the networks, the advertisers, the performers, the audiences, as a statement about what America was and what it was willing to show itself. Black performers appeared on national television in the 1950s, but the appearances were calibrated and bounded in ways that were rarely explicit and always understood. There were things you did and things you didn't do, positions you occupied and ones you didn't, ways of presenting yourself that the format permitted and ways it didn't. The Nat King Cole show was canceled precisely because it exceeded what the advertisers were willing to endorse. A black man hosting a national program, as a host rather than a guest, occupying the center of the frame rather than being permitted at its edges. Armstrong arrived at the television studio on the evening of his scheduled appearance. The specific program, the specific date, the exact network varies slightly depending on whose account you follow. What is consistent across the accounts is the context. That this was a major network appearance, that it followed the events in Birmingham by a relatively short interval, and that everyone in the building that evening was aware, at some level, of the weight of the occasion. Nat King Cole was also in the building that evening. He had not been scheduled to appear on the same program. He was there for a separate reason, a meeting, another obligation, the ordinary bureaucracy of a career that took him through network buildings regularly. The encounter between Cole and Armstrong in the corridor that evening was not arranged. What they said to each other in that corridor is not in any official record. Cole's camp did not document it. Armstrong did not describe it in interviews. The people who claim to have been nearby give accounts that differ in their specifics, but agree in their general outline. That the two men spoke privately for several minutes, that the conversation was quiet and direct in the way that conversations between people who understand each other completely can be direct without explanation, and that Armstrong's expression when Cole finished speaking, and when they parted and Armstrong went to prepare for the broadcast, was something those who saw it found difficult to categorize. Not resolved exactly, not resigned, something more active than either of those things. After the broadcast, Armstrong spoke to journalists in the brief and general terms he used for television appearances. It was good, The audience was great. Television was a fine medium. He did not reference the conversation in the corridor. He did not reference Birmingham. He did not say anything that connected the performance he had just given to the context that had surrounded it. This was consistent with how Armstrong managed his public communication throughout this period. He had learned, over 30 years of working in an America with very specific ideas about what it would permit a black entertainer to say and what it wouldn't, the particular economy of words that kept his access to the stages and the studios and the cameras that his music required. He spoke carefully. He chose his occasions. He expressed his positions, when he did, in music rather than in press statements. And the music was, for those who were willing to listen to it as more than entertainment, consistently clear about what it thought of the world it was moving through. What the evening said about both men, about Cole and Armstrong, was something that 1956 was saying about a great many people in the culture at once, whether or not it was being said explicitly. That the work of being present, of showing up, of performing with full commitment in a context that had not fully committed to you in return, was itself a position. That the smile, the warmth, the full musical presence that both of them brought to every stage and every camera was not a surrender to the conditions under which they worked, but a refusal to let those conditions determine what the audience received. Nat King Cole's show was canceled the following year. Louis Armstrong continued touring. Both of them continued doing what they had always done, walking onto stages and performing completely for whoever was there. They did not make statements about this. They didn't need to. The music was the statement. It had always been the statement. Nat King Cole had been attacked on stage the year before. Louis Armstrong was next. What they said to each other in the corridor before the cameras opened is not in any record. But what Armstrong did after that conversation, what he walked out and gave to 30 million people who had no idea what it had cost, is. It's on tape. It looks, from the outside, like a man who is simply glad to be there, which is exactly what it was, and exactly what it meant.